Hi, my name is Tamar. I work at Kite, and we are a biotech company that's headquartered in Santa Monica, California. For those of you unfamiliar with Santa Monica, it's one of Los Angeles County's 88 cities, and it's on the west side, coastal. And I bring this up because I came to Kite from a background in transportation planning, first working at a transportation planning and engineering company where we would do work with the city and with other cities, and looking at TDM really at that more planning and programmatic level. And then I worked for the local public transit agency, Metro, and that was when Expo was starting to expand from Culver City out to Santa Monica. So in the past 10 years, the city of Santa Monica has done a ton for transportation infrastructure. They now have light rail line that goes from downtown through the city and touches by all of our sites. They have a pretty extensive municipal bus system in addition to Metro's bus system. And they've also invested a lot of infrastructure improvements on active transportation. So if you come to Santa Monica, there's colored bike lanes. They have their own bike share that's docked. They also have floating dockless bike share systems, and we're also ground zero for scooters. So a lot here, and when I first came to the job, I figured, okay, I know all of their policies. They have an aggressive transportation demand management policy because they have been putting in so much infrastructure investment into their transportation programs. I understand what's on the ground. This is going to be easy to set up a commuter program for a rapidly building company. The really cool thing with working in corporate TDM is that your users are sitting right next to you. And so as I started overhearing conversations, or people heard that there's a transportation person now on site and would come up and start talking to me, I realized that, yes, we have great infrastructure in the area, but it doesn't really serve all of our employees. So one point being that although the light rail does go right by our offices, we have a highly skilled labor force, and Santa Monica is not known as a biotechnology hub. So they're not all coming from the local area. A lot of people were mentioning that they had commutes in excess of an hour, and when I started mapping it against what infrastructure is out there, if you were doing anything other than a driving trip, it was going to be a 2-3+ hour drive or transit ride into the office and a 2 or more seat ride. So really with choice users, that wasn't going to be a feasible option. Likewise, I started hearing that really, although yes, AVR requirements are important, it's kind of like taxes. You don't get really jazzed up thinking about what requirements you need from an environmental standpoint. But recruiting and retention were really important, and those were the main drivers. So to balance out the qualitative, conversations that I was having, I started asking, where do people live, mapping that out, seeing where we could align with infrastructure, but also where we needed to be building a program. As one of my colleagues has mentioned, transportation is a very personal choice. So it's not just about what's out there, but also what activities you have throughout the day and how that dictates how you're moving around. So over the first quarter, the spring, we were mostly doing a lot of data mining, and then moved into implementation in the fall, and put together a really comprehensive program that we implemented this fall. So having the shuttles and van pools, but also providing solutions for people who live a little bit closer, who live in areas where there is existing infrastructure, so that we're not adding in a shuttle that goes along the Expo line. That's not the best use of resources, but also as you get closer, you want more flexibility. As you're further away, having comfort and convenience is what's most important. And then also addressing another thing, which is parking constraints from being in a highly dense urban area. One thing I want to touch on was also understanding the user base. So shuttles versus van pools. A shuttle is chauffeured. There's usually amenities like Wi-Fi on board. A van pool is employee driven, but it's smaller, so there's a little bit more flexibility because you're communicating with 7 employees who are setting up the schedule. And what I learned in speaking with my colleagues was that people who had more corporate office jobs, what time you were coming into the office, what time you were leaving, those are a little bit more flexible. But when you're commuting, you're likely responding to emails, on a conference call, doing some work. So having those shuttle amenities were really important. Whereas for a lot of the more shift employees, their work was specifically on site, but they might have the opportunity for staying late and accruing some overtime. So a shuttle didn't work for them because of that finite start and stop time, but collaborating with a handful of other employees, they found van pools to be actually more attractive, to the point that when there is both available to them, they are opting for van pools. So we got these on the ground, got a lot of leadership support. We're now a quarter in, and we're almost at our year-end 2019 targets for participation in active commute programs. With the parking cash out, that is a state requirement. Because we pay for parking, we're required to essentially have an in lieu program. So if you choose to give up your parking space, you get the cash equivalent. And what a lot of businesses will do is say, okay, you can have that or have a transit pass. The challenge there is that someone's making a decision of, am I going to be a full-time alternate commuter or am I going to be a full-time driver? And once you have that parking pass, it makes it a lot easier to start becoming a full-time driver. By separating cash out and saying that you can do this in addition to the other programs we have, allowed people to start off as part-time users and really move and transition over to full-time. So I've been seeing month over month someone saying, you know what, I tried the shuttle or I tried transit, I'm noticing I'm not using my parking space. Can I give it up? And that's relieved a lot of our strain on our limited parking supply, which has been a real pain point across the company. This year, we're also going back to the context of getting between the different sites. So we actually have a last mile challenge here where we have 3 sites in Santa Monica that are just outside of a walk shed. It's about a 15-minute walk roughly between each of our sites. Again, we have parking constraints, and now people are getting to work by ways other than driving alone. So we have been partnering both with the city in providing transit passes to get between the sites, since 2 of them are located really close to light rail, and there's 6-minute headways. But we also partnered with Lime to get a scooter program where essentially people go through training if they have business needs between our sites. They have to follow all of the safety requirements, both from our end, you know, this is a potential risk, but also the city and Lime all have very similar safety requirements. And so you can use the scooters to get between sites. We launched this late January, and we already have 100 employees who participated in in-person scooter and bicycle safety training. So we're leveraging micro-mobility and shared mobility to address our business needs and not just as a last mile solution. So in summary, in terms of navigating implementation, it's really about aligning with leadership, understanding what's the pain points. Is it the environmental requirements? That's something that has to be done, but that's not the narrative that's really driving all of the business decisions. Understanding where those pain points are and how you can create those solutions, and working with the local agency, not against it. So not seeing it as, oh, they're making it difficult for us to do business here, but really, we have the same end goals, they're just the process is a little different. With the scooters, actually having Santa Monica already having set up a really extensive scooter pilot and a really well thought out one allowed us to leverage that into our program because they had done a lot of groundwork in terms of implementation and policies and procedures. And then ownership at all levels. Transportation is personal. It's also something that everyone is a commuter, and so understanding the pain points across all the different organizations and listening and getting that on the ground grassroots feedback really can help build a program that addresses the needs of your business. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Tamar. Kite is really doing some amazing things in terms of providing not just compliance opportunities, but also real life-changing opportunities for the way that people are engaging with transportation. And I think that's a real great story. We do have a couple of questions here from the audience. The first comes from Ken Zapinski. Ken would like to know, how many employees does Kite have? And do you know what the shift breakdown for those employees are? For example, 24/7, mostly daylight workers. What does that landscape look like for you all?
So right now we're at about 1,500 employees, the vast majority based in Southern California. We are rapidly expanding in other areas. In Santa Monica, the vast majority are day shifts. They're not really on a shift schedule, so some people do come in, at 7 o'clock, others come in at 9. Our manufacturing facility does have about 50% day shift, 50% swing shift. For the day shift, for the non-shift employees, we wind up having, again, more flexibility, and that's where those transportation choices are. What's been really interesting is the day and swing shift for manufacturing, because there's a lot of mode shift over to transit during the day shift, as that's when you're hitting rush hour, but the swing shift has had a huge increase in van pool use, because although the trains are running, it's at lower headways, and it's also going further distances. When you get out of work at 11:30 at night, it's challenging.
An excellent question. So we have another question here from Kazoo Studios East, and Kazoo Studios would like to know, what does your outreach program look like for bringing people into these programs? Are you doing events, internal promotions? What does that look like for Kite?
So it's been all of the above. We have done some site-wide transportation fairs, and those have been great. If you reach out to the organizations that you're working with, so I reached out to the local transportation authorities, we have a Santa Monica Bike Center, basically anyone who had a transportation program out here, as well as, the van pool provider, the shuttle provider, got them all on site, provided some In-N-Out burgers because it's Southern California, so that's always a huge draw. That got a lot of people out. But also a lot of the outreach has been going to staff meetings, developing an internal website with all of the transportation resources, and also getting people on day one. So it used to be day one, you received an email of fill out this parking form. Now it's welcome to Kite. We have an extensive transportation program. Here's a summary. Reach out to me. You have the choice between parking cash out or a parking pass. Please complete whichever form for the option that you choose. But really on day one, making that outreach to every new hire has, I've noticed that with new hires, they are participating in really high numbers in alternative transportation programs, because on day one, they're seeing that there's a lot of options, and reaching out to talent acquisition so that they're aware of it during the recruiting process.
It sounds very comprehensive, which I think is indicative of the entire program that you've got going on there. The last question I've got, actually a couple of people asked, and so I'm going to combine what folks have said into one question here. But folks are interested if you have some sense of what your current mode share looks like. How many employees are currently taking alternative modes compared to solo driving?
So we have, once a year, we have to do our commute requirements, and we had a fairly low participation in August when we did our first round of surveys. At that time, we didn't have any programs. Right now, about, I think we're at close to a third of employees, full-time employees, so not contract, are participating in one of the programs. The largest increases have been in transit and van pools. There have been an increase in shuttle usage, but I really actually like that these other, public options are growing the most substantially. And then in terms of parking, about 40% of people in Northern California and about 30% in Southern California have chosen to forego parking.
Wow, that's incredible. So congratulations on all your success and for all the exciting work that you and the Kite Pharma folks are doing.
Thank you.